Next up in the expansion of the most detailed Hogwarts castle ever is of course a scene and a building that everyone can very easily recognize, the flying lesson. So yeah, not exactly the next expansion piece that I was really thinking of for the Hogwarts castle, however we really seem to be sticking with these first two movies, so I guess the flying lesson makes sense. Personally, I was really looking forward to having another piece to attach to my Hogwarts, and while this technically does fill that, because this building kind of sits off on its own, it feels a little bit too separate for me. But all that is to say that this is set 76447, Hogwarts Castle Flying Lessons. It retails for $80 US, 130 Australian, and 70 Great British pounds, with 651 pieces and 6 minifigures. Kicking things off, we have Madame Hooch, who hasn't really changed all too much since the last version of her minifigure. Luckily, she comes along with a really nice starchy cape rather than the soft rubbery ones, which I'm a really big fan of, and overall I really like her torso print and her face prints. Next up is a very standard version of Harry Potter, who you've probably seen 1,000 times before, and the same thing applies for Draco Malfoy in this set. And since this is the flying lesson, it also comes along with Neville Longbottom, who comes along with this gorgeous Remembrall printed translucent headpiece. But in a bit more exciting terms, we have the return of an Oliver Wood minifigure. However, I'm really not a big fan of this face print being used for him. I get that it is a very standard Lego piece, but I feel like Oliver Wood deserves a little bit better. And then last but certainly not least is Professor McGonagall, who has one of the most bland and basic versions I feel like we have ever seen with her. Usually Professor McGonagall is one of my favorite minifigures from Lego Harry Potter, but with the absence of arm printing and skirt printing that I have grown very used to on her, it is a little bit of a jarring difference, but that being said, I am glad that she's included in this set. Now, whilst this build wasn't exactly what I was thinking when I came to a new Hogwarts expansion, I do appreciate the fact that not only can it connect with the existing Hogwarts system, but it can also stand alone and also completely open up to give you a few different variations of how you can actually include this with your Hogwarts system. On this side tower are a couple of clip pieces which will line up perfectly with the Great Hall set, and I assume a couple of other different Harry Potter expansions that we have yet to see. However, personally, I prefer to just keep this building in this little condensed shape, because whilst it can open up and kind of create this really long wall shape, I really feel like condensed and kind of having it off to the side looks a lot better in my opinion. Because if we remember from the movies, the flying lesson scene kind of just takes off in the backgrounds of Hogwarts, and the layout of the actual castle changed quite significantly between the first movie and the third movie. Now, it's important to note that the feature of it being actually able to open up all comes down to the use of one snot piece down the bottom, and that is what allows this statue to be completely self-contained. It's really easy to pick up and move around, and there is no real fear of me feeling like this whole thing is going to fling open, which is really good because inside there are a couple of sections of classrooms that can actually come out, but we'll get to that later. Because starting off with the exterior, overall it is a pretty simple and classic Hogwarts style design. There are no real crazy techniques that were used, with the exception of these little slope pieces that kind of build up the rockwork of Hogwarts into the actual yellow castle section. It leaves us with a couple of gaps, however I do think that that works really nicely in the set, and personally I don't really have any issues with it. But when you open it up, you can see that this set is divided into three main sections. You have the tallest tower, the little small archways, and then this tiny little building off to the side, all of which are connected using a variety of hinge pieces that allow you to fold it up and also create some sort of different shape. You can bend and curve these pieces, which I quite like. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of fit to your shelves, as well as just create a little bit more of an interesting shape and a bit more of dimension to just having a really 2D looking set. Firstly, in this little tower is what I like to believe is McGonagall's office when she sees Harry catching the Remembrall and later recruits him for the Quidditch team. There's really not a lot of space in here, however it does include a tiny little desk, but there is no resemblance of any sort of chair, which further emphasizes the fact that I think this was made for McGonagall, since she is a character that doesn't have legs and can't exactly sit down. Lower down is where you will find the various amounts of Quidditch trophies that Hermione points out to Harry in the Philosopher's Stone, including this really nice stickered Nexo Knight's shield piece that has that iconic James Potter Seeker emblem that she points out to him in order to encourage him a little bit. And then on either side is where you attach the Hogwarts Castle portrait pieces. As we move across, the first is this tiny little archway, which there's really not a lot to this section, and then next to it is this area where there are a couple of clear clip pieces where you can attach the various brooms that Harry and Draco have. On the opposite side to the wall, there are a couple of little studs that you can push in order to move them up and down, but there really isn't all that much mobility, but it is really cute that you can have these characters flying around around, although you might need to twist the clip pieces on the end in order to get the brooms to actually angle at a good looking position. And finally, that brings us to the main tower. Now, this main tower's interior is made to the exact same dimensions as the middle section of the Hogwarts Great Hall set. This means that all of the pieces inside that can easily be removed of this section could also integrate with the Hogwarts Great Hall section if you wanted to mix and match things around. That being said, I feel like these interiors really aren't all that exciting. The first one just basically has a variety of different Quidditch equipment, which, given the fact that Oliver Wood is included in this set, I guess it makes sense for story reasons, but it really feels just like a waste of space to me. Because they wanted to keep the walls so short in order to not interrupt these beautiful archway pieces that are built into this structure, the whole thing just looks incredibly flat and really doesn't offer a lot. Some benefits though to this section include the return of these little beta helmet pieces, which I loved using my original ones from the 2010 Quidditch set in my Quidditch teams. I also love the dark red recoloring for the quaffle. I think it looks way better, and the use of this Technic ball has always been my favorite for the quaffle until hopefully one day they decide to do a specially molded quaffle piece. The bludgers are represented by some plain dark bluish grey studs, which I would really love to see a different piece used for these, because this is just not screaming bludger to me. I think part of it is the fact that they are grey, and part of it is the fact that they're not particularly round. On the layer above, however, you have this tiny little build of a transfiguration classroom, which when you look at sets like the Charms classroom and the Potions classroom, the fact that Transfigurations is just a little bit more bare bones and doesn't completely latch up is a little bit disappointing. I get why it is built the way it is, just given the exterior building. However, it's really clear that they just did not have the piece budget for this price point in order to build this setup a bit more. Luckily though, this one does have some hinge pieces, so you can open it up a little bit, and there are spaces for 4 different students to sit at a desk, which is pretty cute, and there is a tiny little amount of space if you want to place McGonagall there. But probably the most interesting section of this build is the fact that there is this tiny little turntable that allows you to turn a parrot into a goblet, just like we see in the Chamber of Secrets with the spell Veraveto. Other than that though, this classroom doesn't really offer anything, and by far is definitely the most boring out of all of the classrooms that we have seen, but again, it does make sense in the context of the set it was supposed to be included with. I personally just wouldn't go swapping any of these classrooms around with all of the other classrooms I have in this Hogwarts system, because I feel like they don't necessarily meet the same standard that I have come to expect from the Harry Potter Hogwarts classroom scenes. Overall, I think this set is cute, and it is definitely the most fleshed out version of the flying lesson scene that we have ever had as a set, which I think is something to credit here. If you're a really big fan of the Philosopher's Stone or just the Quidditch scenes in general, I mean, maybe this is a must buy for you, but I feel like for the average Harry Potter fan, this is probably one that you could very easily skip, especially at that $80 price point. I also don't think it's essential into having the most detailed Hogwarts castle ever, and I feel like that is really where this set is let down. There's nothing inherently bad with this set, I just feel like there are way better options for you to spend your money on when it comes to the overall LEGO Harry Potter lineup. But let me know if you're going to pick up this set down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing to my channel down below, and until next time, I'll see you later.